Opening her eyes, the girl saw herself chained to the bed and had no idea where she was. As soon as the girl tried to remember what had happened to her, the sound of gunfire rang out in the room. Immediately after that, she saw a man trying to hit her with bullets. But despite the fact that just a few minutes ago the girl was unconscious, she already confidently understood what was happening. As soon as she neutralized the man, she began to shout and ask why he had attacked her, knowing that there would be no answer. But as it turned out, this man was not the only one who wanted to get rid of the girl, and she immediately felt a weapon next to her. The man thanked her for getting rid of that guy instead of him, and added that he didn't expect to get her head today. The girl, not afraid of death, calmly asked her husband if he knew who she was. But he wasn't going to explain anything, saying that his job was to get rid of people, not to explain anything. Immediately afterwards, a shot rang out, but it was fired by the wrong man. The girl, who was already expecting death, saw the man lying on the floor with no signs of life. Before her, she saw a third man with a gun in his hand in her room in just a few minutes. Continuing to hold the weapon, the man was a little indignant that the girl did not recognize him and explained that he was her husband. Forgetting about the weapon in his hands, the girl was very surprised that she had such a handsome husband. She immediately rushed to hug him and ask why he hadn't come in for so long, which completely confused her husband. The man didn't know whether to be more surprised, because the girl took the stranger at his word, or because she wasn't afraid of him at all. Continuing to hug him, the girl asked why such a nice man would deceive her, so she did not doubt the truth of his words. But the girl didn't dare ask about his life, because he still had a weapon in his hand. Remembering that she was in the hospital for a reason, the girl felt unbearable pain from one of her wounds. The pain was so bad that she didn't care if he was lying or not, so she asked him for help. Immediately after that, she fell helplessly into his arms. Just before losing consciousness again, the girl promised that she would be obedient. But it was hard for the man to believe her words, because he remembered how unbearable her character was. Previously, the girl behaved very confidently, defiantly, and sternly, telling the guy not to get tangled under her feet. The man could not forget how Li Yuan explained that their paths had long since parted ways and ordered him not to stand in her way. The blood on the man's body testified to the seriousness of her words, and he replied that from now on, they owed each other nothing. Looking at the girl's sweet face, the man could not believe that she, who had caused him so many problems, would obey him. Aiming at her head again, he added that only the dead were obedient. Immediately after that, another shot rang out, but again not at the girl. At the last moment, the man managed to notice another hired killer and neutralize him in time. Gu Xingye didn't like that he tried to shoot from an ambush. Approaching him, he said that, despite the girl's serious injuries, he shouldn't even think about getting rid of her with one shot. Meanwhile, the wounded man, holding his wound, replied that he was not afraid, because he was not ashamed to die at the hands of such a famous person. But Gu Xingye wasn't going to let him go so easily, and explained that first he would tell him everything he knew, and only then could he do whatever he wanted with himself. It was at this moment that the man's subordinates appeared in the room, sensing danger. While they were expressing their concerns, the man ordered the mercenary to be taken away and found out who he was working for. One of them, pointing to the girl, asked what to do with her. Immediately after that, he ran his hand over her neck, hinting that she should be rid of it once and for all. But Gu Xingye strictly forbade them to do so and explained that they might still need her. Contrary to his words, the man reminded her that last night she had taken the life of their blood brother. However, he repeated that he needed her, so no one had the right to do anything with her. Another man ordered his partner to leave so he could talk to his boss in peace. Meanwhile, the girl was in a dream where her thoughts seemed to float above the seabed, and a soft whisper came from somewhere. She felt like she was slowly sinking to the bottom, but before she completely sank, a warm wind enveloped her. Before her, she saw a man in whose warmth she melted and fell asleep. It was at this moment that Li Yuan opened her eyes again, not understanding the meaning of this dream. Looking around, Li Yuan realized that she had managed to survive again, and finally guessed that it was that boy who had saved her. No sooner had she thought of that than she heard his voice and saw him lying next to her. Li Yuan was even confused and embarrassed by the situation. Reminding herself that Gu Xingye called himself her husband, she changed her behavior in a second and became sweet again. After all, she remembered the guy who had run up to her yesterday with a gun and declared that he was her husband. Gu Qingye, approaching, quietly asked if she remembered anything. The girl awkwardly replied that she didn't even remember her own name, let alone his. The man, touching her face, called her name and reminded her who he was to her. At the same time, he couldn't help but notice that even with a serious injury, she was able to fight the assassin. After that, the man told her to get up and go have breakfast, and he promised to call the doctor and find out what to do about the amnesia. Suddenly, the girl again felt a sharp pain from yesterday's fight, which still hadn't subsided. When she said that he wasn't even a doctor, the man calmly replied that he would just examine the wound. He asked her not to be nervous, reminding her that he had once personally tattooed her back. And then he emphasized again that he was her husband, promising that it wouldn't hurt. Li Yuan, embarrassed, grumbled that he was a liar because she still felt pain. After that, the man touched her earlobe and asked if she really didn't remember anything. She just smiled and replied that she didn't remember anything yet, but she was glad that she was being looked after by such an attractive man who also called himself her husband. After a moment, Li Wen wondered how long the examination would take, since he hadn't even treated the wound yet. She felt uncomfortable with how long and intently Gu Xingye looked at her, and she wanted to get dressed quickly. Suspecting that her husband was watching her closely, she decided to play along and let him continue his inspection. Looking at his face, the girl felt that he did not wish her harm, but still decided not to lose her vigilance. Eventually, after a long time of treating her wounds, they finally sat down to breakfast. Watching her husband feed her, she noticed that it brought him genuine joy, and for a moment she even believed that Gu Xingye was truly her husband. At the same time, she noticed that instead of metal ones, she was given ordinary plastic utensils that could not be damaged. It was then that Li Yuan realized that it wasn't just her husband who was being overly cautious around her. Noticing a lot of guards around, the girl decided to check her guess. She suddenly approached the man sharply, giving the impression that she wanted to do something. And as she expected, the guards reacted instantly. Then the girl calmly explained that she just wanted to get a knife to cut the bacon because her own was too blunt. The man came closer, handed her the knife himself, and said that he really should have thought of it sooner. This moment finally convinced her that her subordinates also knew that she was not his real wife. Continuing to smile sweetly, she concluded that at worst they were enemies, but that this could not be shown. After all, first you need to find out what exactly they want from her. Suddenly, for the first time in 2 days, shots rang out. The man reacted instantly and hid her behind the door while the guards covered them. Gu Xingye asked her not to be afraid and assured her that she was completely safe with him. The girl did not expect such a good opportunity to appear so quickly. While no one was looking, she grabbed a knife, planning to get rid of her fake husband. She was about to carry out her plan, but she didn't have time because Gu Xingye was hit by a fragment intended for her. Seeing that he had closed her in on himself, she was once again able to believe that his words about marriage could be true. Meanwhile, the girl who organized the attack was sitting in a tree, knowing that Li Yuan was in the house. She continued to shoot at the house, trying to force her to come outside. At that moment, another bullet whizzed past Li Yuan, and she noticed that it was rubber, meaning it couldn't seriously injure. Carefully touching the ball next to her, the girl assumed that it might be another test from Gu Xingye. Thinking that he was just feigning defiance, Li Wen was glad that she didn't have time to do anything, otherwise she would have fallen into the trap. Meanwhile, the attacker's subordinates warned that the situation was becoming too dangerous and they should retreat. She wanted to continue, but the men explained that Gu Xingye's people were already there and had real weapons, so it was impossible to defeat them. It was at this moment that a warhead whizzed past her, finally confirming their words. After moving a safe distance from the house, the men asked why they had to break the rules and risk their lives like that. The girl was angered by this question, and she sharply reminded him that all this was being done for the boss. Explaining with the help of a diagram she had drawn herself how she had staged the attack so that Li Yuan could escape, she only heard their criticism of her drawing skills. After their remarks, one of the men received a painful blow to the head, and she continued to scold them for the fact that their incompetence kept the boss still at large. One of them quietly remarked that they had been shooting for so long, but the girl had never appeared, so he assumed she might already be dead. There was indeed some truth in the man's words, which is why the girl was so scared when she heard them. But within a second, shouts were pouring down on him, demanding that he watch his tongue, because no one would dare disrespect her skill. The woman firmly believed that this girl could not have died just like that, because she did not want to die at all. Song Lu remembered how Li Yuan always protected her from her abusers. As it turned out, her father owed a debt to a man and gave his daughter away as payment. Li Yuan could never stand it when someone bullied the weaker ones, especially women. Pressing the man's head to the ground with her heel, she considered him a coward who only felt strong when he tormented the defenseless. Meanwhile, the man, trying to save himself, showered himself with flattery and begged, promising to fulfill any wish. Turning to Sun Lu, the girl revealed that her worst nightmare was now begging for mercy like a pitiful dog, and asked if she was still afraid of him. Without taking her eyes off the defenseless girl, she said that it was up to her to decide whether to wake up from this horror or not. After these words, Li Yuan placed a weapon in her hands and ordered her to become stronger and destroy all who mocked her. Remembering how the girl had saved her, Sun Lu promised that she would definitely repay her and save her in return. Meanwhile, Li Yuan sat next to the man and tended to his wounds. While doing so, she noticed a deep old scar on his body. Seeing that she was looking at him for too long, the man directly asked what exactly she was looking at. Li Yuan felt like he was watching her closely, trying to figure out if she had really lost her memory. But she had a wonderful acting talent and always said how much she adored her husband, especially his body. Gu Xingye smiled at her words, and as he was about to change clothes, called her with him. Entering the wardrobe, which took up an entire spacious room, the girl could not hide her surprise. Li Yuan immediately started looking through the things, because if they were married, her clothes should be here. But instead, she only saw her school uniform. Seeing the cute pink dress, she couldn't believe she could ever wear something like that. While the girl was looking at what she thought were children's things, the man silently pointed to other outfits. The clothes looked as if they belonged to completely different people, and it seemed extremely strange to her. Watching her reaction, the man asked if she remembered anything. He explained that everything here is connected to her and holds their happy memories together. Li Yuan was afraid to even ask what memories could be associated with such strange clothes. The man remembered how once she dragged him with her to the shops, which he was very unhappy about. She insisted that she was buying clothes not only for herself, but also for him. The boy wanted to object because their uncle had given them the money for the shopping. To calm him down a little, the girl held out a snow-white t-shirt that she had bought especially for him. Gu Xingye tried not to show his feelings, but he couldn't contain his joy at being cared for. However, he feigned indifference and declared that the bribery had failed and he would not be friends with her anyway. Li Yuan replied frankly that no one wanted to be friends with him at all, so now he would belong to her. And she added that in the future, he would definitely become her husband. Hearing this, Gu Xingye exclaimed indignantly that he would never accept this shirt, but still continued to follow her, carrying all of her packages. Recalling the events of 10 years ago, the man said that this t-shirt has a special meaning for him. Li Yuan, looking through the wardrobe, pointed to one of the outfits and asked if it was so important to him because it had almost no fabric. Gu Xingye didn't even understand where these clothes came from at first, but then he remembered that it was Huo Junjie's prank. Wanting to change the subject, he explained that they were rarely here. He had brought her here for safety, and that these clothes had been bought by an assistant. Li Yuan, who previously thought he was just trying to improve their relationship, silently accepted this explanation. Remembering her injury, the man asked if her hand hurt. He added that there was another way to speed up healing and gently kissed the wound. At such moments, the girl could not help but admire his beauty and grace. Next to him, Li Yuan lost her ability to think just from his scent. And it was at this romantic moment that the assistant unceremoniously interrupted their idyll. This was the last scene the man wanted to see, so he immediately hurried to leave. Soon, a doctor arrived and carefully examined the images of the girl's brain. Fortunately, the injuries were not serious, and memory was expected to return within a year or two. Looking at Gu Xingye, the girl realized that she had to find out his true intentions as soon as possible, because anything could happen in 2 years. After that, Gu Xingye wanted to personally escort the doctor out of the estate. Li Yuan, who was watching with them from the window, felt that the man was also unhappy, but she didn't understand why. Suddenly, a bottle of pills without any label caught her attention, so as soon as the man returned to the villa, the girl couldn't help but ask what exactly the doctor had told him. He explained that these medications help restore memory and asked her to take them regularly. However, Li Wen did not want to drink unknown drugs at all, because she did not know what exactly was in that bottle. She cautiously asked again what kind of medicine it was and why there was no label on it. Her curiosity did not go unnoticed, and Gu Qingye wondered where she had so many concerns. Approaching almost face to face, he quietly asked if she had suddenly thought that there might be poison in there. While the girl was trying to think of an answer, he added with a smile that it was just a joke. Li Yuan decided that there was logic in his words, because if he wanted her dead, he would have done it immediately. Yet she was haunted by the thought that he might be deceiving her, although the motive remained unclear. Her head was splitting from the strain and trying to remember the past, so she decided to wait for the right moment to find out the truth. Seeing that the girl was suddenly upset, the man decided that she was unwell and offered to take her to the bedroom. But even there, he insisted that she take the medicine, which seemed extremely suspicious to her. When she refused, the man decided to feed her himself by taking a pill in his mouth. Li Wen recoiled sharply and rejected such a proposal. Her reaction suddenly reminded the man of what she once was. Then he grabbed her sharply and, during the kiss, pushed the pill into her mouth. Holding her, he didn't notice how she tried to break free, despite her wounds that hadn't yet healed. In the end, he backed down, apologized, and explained to Dean that he couldn't control his emotions because of stupid thoughts, after which he left her to rest. Left alone, the girl could not forget the taste of his lips. While she was wondering if he really cared about her, Junji called her husband and asked if the pills had worked. After the conversation, the man informed Xingye that the meeting was scheduled and reported that the girl was under their control. Meanwhile, one of their enemies learned that Li Yuan not only survived, but also that the killer had been captured by Gu Qingye. Hearing this, he became furious and threw a nut right in his subordinate's face. He, trembling, begged to be given another chance to correct his mistake. In the end, he got the chance, but with orders to act more carefully so that no one would find out who was behind the assassination attempt. Meanwhile, after 2 weeks at the estate, Li Wen's wounds had almost healed. Today, the husband went to the trade association on business, strictly forbidding her from going outside, which created a feeling of suffocating control. Besides, the guards' gazes seemed heavy to her, like stones. The situation was so tense that even when she went to the restroom, the men were warily watching her every move. In this position, it seemed to her that she could be shot at any moment, although perhaps she was simply overreacting. However, she realized that to achieve her goals, she had to establish a relationship with them. She was about to say something, but suddenly, she noticed a knife in the hands of one of the guards. As it turned out, the man just wanted to show his daughter-in-law his family talent. Skillfully slicing an apple, Li Yuan decided that at such a moment, it was better not to say anything offensive. At the same time, she couldn't help but be surprised to see how skillfully he cut the fruit. Yes, albeit cautiously, she gradually began to establish contact with them. The guards treated her surprisingly well, and one even made her a special tea. As soon as she raised the cup to her lips, she smelled a strange smell. To avoid arousing suspicion, Li Wen said the tea was too hot and would drink it later. Watching them, the girl assumed that they could have added something either by accident or by taking advantage of the commotion, because it was unlikely that it was Gu Xingye's order, especially since she was even given a plastic knife to peel fruit. This led her to think that among those present there was a person who was afraid of her and at the same time had his own plans for her. Meanwhile, Song Lu carefully read the dossier prepared for her on Huo Junjie. Her assistant suggested starting with one of his subordinates, but that would require a flawless plan or trap. The girl, without looking away, asked who exactly he was proposing to use as bait. He reluctantly replied that he was ready to sacrifice himself for the sake of the chapter, but he doubted that the enemy would like it. Just then, another subordinate entered and informed them that Li Yuan had been introduced as the master's wife to the doctor who was visiting the villa. But what scared the girl most was that Li Yuan had lost her memory and, according to the doctor, was behaving obediently, like a trained rabbit. At that moment, Sun Lu imagined the humiliation her sister had suffered. She wasn't going to leave it like that and promised to get her out of this hell at any cost. Meanwhile, the girl sat and thought about what to do with the suspicious drink. She waited for the tea to cool and wondered why whoever had mixed it up hadn't taken any action. Suddenly, one of the guards approached her and asked if she liked the taste of the tea. She almost thought that he had mixed something up, when suddenly she saw the man himself about to drink her tea. Then, under the pretext of a mosquito on his cheek, the girl gave him a good slap. Seeing that the glass with the drink had broken, she made a sad face and pretended to regret that she would not be able to drink the tea. While the girl was about to return to her room, the man was recovering from the blow, almost seeing his great-grandmother. At the same time, Li Yuan was already crossing him off the list of suspects because he almost drank that tea himself. She couldn't help but admit that the traitor was acting extremely cautiously and skillfully covering his tracks. While pondering her next steps, the girl did not notice the unfamiliar silhouette right in front of her. When she turned around, she saw a weapon pointed at her. Meanwhile, Gu Xingye, unsuspecting, was discussing official matters with a man. After finishing the conversation, he invited him to come in for a drink, adding that the store had recently added a lot of new products. However, Gu Xingye curtly refused, explaining that he already had plans for the evening. Rumors have already reached the interlocutor that he is hiding a beautiful wife at home. He didn't have time to answer anything because the phone rang. Upon hearing what had happened in his house, the man's face changed dramatically, and fear flashed in his eyes. After apologizing to Mr. Liao, he explained that he had to leave urgently. Mr. Liao had already guessed what he was doing and said that the drink intended for him was never served, only snacks. He believed that when he returned home, he would find the canary in its cage brutally poisoned. But the man was already rushing home, and as soon as he entered the villa, he immediately asked where Li Wan was. Opening the bedroom door, Gu Xingye saw the girl, safe and sound, calmly eating a snack. She noticed his depressed face, assured him that everything was fine with her, and asked what was making him sad. Gu Xingye himself couldn't understand what was happening to him and why he was so worried about her. The girl gestured for him to sit next to her so she could tell her what had happened. Meanwhile, Huo Junji ordered the others to be careful, as there had recently been an assassination attempt, and it seemed that there was a traitor among his own people. This man was one of Gu Xingye's closest people, so he was the one who was asked why the boss left the girl with him. He explained that, according to the boss, when she worked at his uncle's house, she allegedly stole the seal of the president of the trade association. Suddenly, Huo Junji noticed some suspicious commotion nearby. It turned out to be a carefully staged scene, with several men clinging to a seemingly defenseless girl. Like a true gentleman, he could not stay away and decided to intervene. Approaching Sun Lu, the man cautiously asked if she was okay. The girl thanked him for his help and asked him to walk her home. Meanwhile, Li Yuan began her story and said that the gun barrel was just a few centimeters from her face. But surprisingly, she wasn't scared and even realized that she had half a minute to do something. When she heard the whistle of a bullet right next to her ear, she felt not fear, but a strange inner excitement. She felt like a predator on the hunt. Therefore, she instantly struck the attacker, knocking the weapon out of his hands. However, Li Yuan didn't expect him to use a smoke bomb, and then she understood why he needed a special mask. Fortunately, the girl noticed this in time and tried to breathe as little as possible. But unfortunately, she never managed to catch the attacker. The man listened to her silently, never interrupting. Looking at his stony face, she asked why he was so cold. To ease the tension a little, he asked if she had really let the criminal escape without even seeing his face. He assumed that dark things were going on in this place, which is why the rats were drawn here and causing trouble. Leaving her alone, the man finally told her to rest well and promised to deal with everything personally. Li Yuan was outraged by his behavior, as he did not even stay to comfort her, despite the fact that she was almost shot. After these words, Gu Xingye turned sharply and walked up to her. Running his fingers over her face, he thought that she definitely didn't need to be comforted right now. And in a moment, he just pounced on the girl, thinking that she would definitely like this trick. But when Li Yuan didn't answer his question and only said that he should let her go, he froze. The man, out of curiosity, decided to check what would happen if he still disobeyed. Then the girl cursed briefly and without unnecessary words and clearly explained what exactly would happen to him. Before she realized what she had said, the guy had already pulled away and realized that no amount of comfort would help here. When darkness fell, exhausted by the events of the day, the girl finally lay down to rest. It was at this moment that a man quietly entered her room, eager to check if she was really asleep. Holding the knife in his hands, Gu Xingye thought that if she remained this defenseless forever, it would even be convenient. Suddenly, he sharply swiped the blade just a few millimeters from her face and made sure she didn't move. Deciding that the girl was indeed asleep, he quietly left the room, wishing her sweet dreams. And the girl, who was barely holding back her emotions, realized he had just tried to kill her. Meanwhile, another man was already standing at her house, where she thanked him once again for driving away the hooligans and escorting her home. He merely remarked that thanks were unnecessary and asked if she was hurt. Turning on all her acting talent, Sun Lu sighed and said that she had suffered much more mentally than physically because she was still scared. Seeing that she was about to cry, the boy came closer and began to calm her down. She thought he was a good pretender and decided to see how long he could play his part. So she started telling me how, ever since she'd been living alone, she'd been constantly harassed by bandits. Huo Junji, upon hearing what they wanted to do to the defenseless girl, could not contain his indignation and began to scold the scoundrels. He firmly promised that from now on she would never encounter such people again. Noticing that the tea had already cooled, the girl decided to pour fresh tea. But suddenly she slipped, and the man caught her at the last moment. Sun Lu explained that she had probably sprained her leg and would not be able to walk anytime soon. Hearing this, he silently picked her up and headed towards the bedroom. At that moment, the girl could barely contain her joy, deciding that he had finally fallen into her trap. She was ready to sacrifice her own body to save her boss and thought the matter was already over. But her surprise was boundless when Huo Junji simply left her to rest and went home. The next day, Huo Junji gathered all the guards and asked directly which of them wanted to get rid of the girl. The girl herself stood nearby and listened attentively to every word. The man was determined to expose the traitor, so he ordered everyone to enter the office in turn. During questioning, he explained that when it comes to her, his boss gets so worried that he loses objectivity. Li Yuan believed that this is how men should treat their lovers, so she asked if he had a woman for whom he was ready to do something like this. The question caught him off guard, and Huo Junji was momentarily confused. Taking advantage of the pause, she asked why the boss was treating her so strangely, and if something had happened between them in the past. To her surprise, the guy replied that they were once in love with each other, but then something painful happened. The girl was impatient to know the details, but when she heard that she had allegedly betrayed him, it didn't fit in her head at all. Suddenly, she remembered that a man never forgives traitors, and this meant mortal danger for her. Therefore, Li Yuan persistently began to question how exactly the betrayal took place. Not receiving an answer, the girl wondered how she could have done such a thing to such a man. She wanted to ask his assistant, but realized that now was a bad time. Meanwhile, the interrogation continued. Some guards said they were in the warehouse, others that they were in the restroom. The girl thought it was absurd, because the cameras had been broken before the attack, and it was impossible to verify their words. The man only told her to leave everything to him and get a good rest. But she still couldn't help herself and tried to ask about the betrayal again. However, before she could finish, he abruptly left. Remembering his gaze, his touches, and even his kisses, Li Yuan could not believe that she was capable of betraying him. She tried to convince herself that maybe she was just exaggerating and pushed away the intrusive thoughts. In the end, the girl decided that now she had to do everything possible to please him and not become the next victim. Stretching, the girl decided that the best way to improve the relationship was to cook something delicious for her husband. When he returned home, Gu Xingye saw her with a plate of braised pork ribs that she had prepared especially for him. Surprised by such a sudden change in mood, the man cautiously asked if everything was okay and if the kitchen had not been damaged. Then, trying to relieve the tension, he joked that maybe those were the murderers she had dealt with, now lying on a plate in front of him. Unable to resist, he added another reproach and asked if she had by any chance decided to poison him openly. She didn't respond to his jokes, only quietly asking again to at least taste it. Carefully taking a piece and putting it in his mouth, the man was forced to admit that the dish was indeed delicious. He even asked her to bring the food to him personally the next time she cooked. After that, he advised her to go rest, explaining that he had a few more things to do and would be back soon. Left in the kitchen, Li Wen stood motionless for a long time, unable to understand how she could have ever betrayed him. Meanwhile, the man, having entered one of the rooms, approached the painting and touched it. A secret passage opened behind the canvas, where he saw the caught traitor. Upon learning that the man would not admit who hired him, the man remarked that the mercenaries from the Assassin Alliance did not belong to any trade association, and their employer was unlikely to believe their silence. Gu Xingye coldly added that if he hadn't hidden him here, the traitor would have been dead a long time ago. As soon as the men left the room, another stranger entered with a gun in his hands. As expected, the boss didn't need any extra witnesses, so they decided to get rid of the prisoner. But as he got closer, the stranger suddenly realized that he had been deceived, that there was only a mannequin standing in front of him. At this point, the host returned to the secret room and announced that the murderer had been moved to a safer location. Huo Junji finally admitted that boss Liao from the Qilin Trade Association was behind everything. Huo Junji calmly asked what they were going to do with the traitor, because letting him go would be pointless. In response, he briefly explained that he did not forgive traitors any more than boss Liao did. In his opinion, treason is the most serious crime in their case, and even the money received does not guarantee the traitor's life. At this moment, Huo Junji received a message on his phone from a girl he had recently met, offering to spend time together. Meanwhile, the girl was wondering when she would finally be able to get closer to Gu Xingye. The thought that she had once betrayed him acted on her like a time bomb that could explode at any moment. Li Wen decided that the best way to get closer was to seize the initiative and turn their relationship to her own advantage. But suddenly, she was again struck by an unbearable headache, accompanied by terrifying hallucinations. In her delirium, she saw a man with a wound hidden by a tattoo and heard his voice saying that now she was just a bird in his cage. Unable to bear it, the girl screamed sharply, trying to drown out the voice in her head. And at that very moment, she was snapped out of her thoughts by a stranger who persistently demanded to meet with her boss. Even the guards couldn't stop her, so they were forced to let her inside. Seeing Li Yuan in front of her, the girl finally understood why they didn't want to let her in. The visitor acted as if she had come to chase away her mistress, and it was frankly annoying. Not knowing all the circumstances, but remembering the rule of not hitting someone lying down, the girl forced a smile and even offered the guest some chips. However, calling her an older sister angered the stranger even more. She was about to throw herself at him with her fists, but the guard stopped her. Ding Li was convinced that they were only pretending to be defenseless in front of her to win Xing Ye's sympathy. Not letting her interlocutor get a word in, she poured out accusations one after another. Finally, Dean Li introduced herself as the man's current girlfriend and called her rival a shameless mistress. Unaware of what was happening in his house, the man meanwhile went to meet with boss Ding Yuan. Gu Xingye could not refuse, because he was the president of the city's General Chamber of Commerce. During the conversation, the man incidentally mentioned that Li Yuan now lives next door to him. At home, the girl continued to scream that Gu Xingye was keeping her around only to get revenge for the betrayal. Meanwhile, the man coldly declared to his interlocutor that he had no feelings for her and was keeping her locked up precisely because of that betrayal. Moreover, after his uncle's death, the square seal ended up in her hands. Li Yuan, guessing that the reasons might be deeper, decided to use the girl as a source of information. She planned to first provoke her to reveal everything herself. Therefore, she asked the most painful question: was she in a close relationship with him? As expected, the provocation worked, and the girl flared up even more. But Li Yuan wasn't going to stop, and continued to press, enjoying her confusion. And in the end, from the words of another girl, she learned the terrible truth. In fact, they were enemies, and he kept her around only because she had something important to him. Not having recovered from this news, she heard even worse. It turned out that it was she who had once inflicted a wound on him, which was hidden from his father. Although it did not kill him, Li Yuan lived in constant stress, unable to believe that she could be such a cruel person and betray him. Meanwhile, her interlocutor continued to pour out bitter words, ruthlessly expressing everything she thought about her. As the conversation was coming to an end, Ding Yuan suddenly asked if she knew what people valued most about him, and without waiting for an answer, he himself explained that, like his uncle, he knew how to act quietly, without unnecessary noise and problems. The girl silently packed her suitcases, realizing that now it was not so important who was to blame, as it was necessary to save her own life. At that very moment, a man suddenly burst into the room and sharply asked why she was packing her things. She calmly replied that his girlfriend had ordered her to get out. Upon learning that it was Ding Luying, Gu Xingye explained that she was just the daughter of the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and there was nothing between them but friendly relations. The girl just sighed and said that even with her memory loss, she wasn't interested in his novels, and if she disappeared, he wouldn't even notice. When he ordered her to stay, she smiled and noted that he was simply covering up control with protection, although in reality, he had completely different goals. Running her fingers over the tattoo that hid the scar, Li Wen asked if she had caused the wound. But even in such a tense situation, the man did not admit that he hated her. She came close and whispered that to him she was just a bird in a cage, which he enjoyed controlling her every step. In response, he briefly said that he just wanted to protect her. Shaking her hand, the man asked only one thing, namely to trust him. But she bitterly recalled that he kept her locked up, gave her unknown medications, and assigned armed men to her, supposedly for protection. So she eventually asked him to just let her go. Gu Xingyi insisted again that only with him was she safe, because the outside world was deadly dangerous for her. However, she understood that after the medicine, after his wound, which she had inflicted, it would be even more dangerous for her to stay here. She needed to get out and find someone who could confirm her identity. Seizing the moment, she grabbed a weapon from his clothes and threatened that if he didn't let her go, she would kill herself. He had no choice, so he agreed to her terms and let her go. In exchange, he asked only for a promise to take care of himself and added that he would wait for her return. As she left his house, she mentally apologized, knowing she wouldn't be able to keep her word. After getting behind the wheel, she decided to drive to a house with a courtyard, because she felt that was where she would be able to remember something. This house had appeared in her dreams more than once, so she knew the way almost by heart. But along the way, memories of her last meeting with Gu Xingye did not leave her. These thoughts were enough for her to lose her vigilance and suddenly see a truck speeding straight towards her. Before she could do anything, she swerved sharply and crashed into the curb. Unable to even get out of the car, she saw armed guards exiting the truck. At that moment, she realized that Gu Xingye would not joke with her like that, and therefore there was still a traitor in the villa. As soon as one of the men approached her, a bullet hit him right in the head. Li Yun sat motionless behind the wheel, trying to make out the face of her unexpected savior. A strange man appeared before her, addressing her as if they were old friends. Getting into the car without being invited, he calmly announced that the guards were dead and would not tell anyone anything anymore. Not understanding how one could be so crazy, she still decided to take the chance and pretend that they knew each other. She didn't know what she was like before, but it seemed that her character was completely different in the past, because now her behavior seemed strange to everyone, and it didn't escape his attentive gaze. He already guessed that the accident could have affected her memory. Continuing the dangerous game, the man said with a smile that he would be very upset if she forgot him. Li Yuan tried to convince him that his memory was fine. Meanwhile, unnoticed by him, she was looking for a suitable fragment to use as a weapon, and in an instant, she cold-bloodedly stuck a splinter into his neck. Jumping out of the car, she said a quick goodbye and hoped she would never see him again. She realized that she had only angered this madman even more, and therefore she needed to run as quickly as possible. But he couldn't escape, so he shot her and coldly remarked that, as usual, she forgot to finish off her enemies. Crouching over her unconscious body, he suggested they go to his house to reminisce about the good old days. Meanwhile, Huo Junjie was walking with his Song Lu, and suddenly suggested climbing to the roof of one of the buildings. When he started talking about his parents, the girl next to him unconsciously remembered her own father. To be more precise, she remembered how she suffered throughout her childhood because of her father's gambling addiction and his huge debts. One day, people he owed money to noticed her hiding in a closet. During these memories, tears involuntarily appeared in the girl's eyes. The man noticed that something was wrong with Sun Lu, but she quickly explained that she had simply been looking at the scenery and remembered something from the past. Immediately after that, she added that she was fine and that just his presence was enough for her, and then suddenly kissed him. At this moment, a passenger in a passing car recognized Huo Junjie. Meanwhile, the girl slowly regained consciousness, not expecting to survive again. Opening her eyes, Li Wen saw the face of her acquaintance above her, who recognized in her actions the features of the former Li Wen. He noted that her attack was sudden and painful for him, but it did not bring her any results. The girl coldly replied that such a lustful monster like him could not die so easily. At the same time, she realized that this man might know a lot of useful things, so soon they were back in the car. It was thanks to this crazy man that she finally realized how she had behaved before and decided to pretend so that he wouldn't guess about her memory loss. And at that moment, she noticed Huo Junjie kissing a girl who was closely related to her. The man also noticed the interest in her eyes and couldn't resist making a few lewd remarks. In the end, he just explained that this place was extremely convenient for getting rid of unwanted bodies. After some time, they finally arrived at his residence, where Li Yuan began to treat and bandage his wounds. Looking around, she realized that this was not just an apartment, but a fully equipped office, almost a pharmaceutical laboratory. Hearing his offer to take a bath, the girl assumed that they must be pretty close friends. Without hesitation, she tried to politely decline the offer. The man guessed that she thought he was going to spy and immediately denied it, calling her suspicions delusional. Seeing his reaction, the girl was finally convinced that there was nothing but friendship between them. However, the man returned to his vulgar jokes. From his words, she understood that he simply meant another crime, and this finally convinced her that there was something wrong with his head. Remembering that he had promised to tell her something, he asked her to follow him. Leading her to the medicine, he explained that this time the formula was complicated. The materials were hard to come by, and it would take another week to prepare the placebo. Looking around the table, Li Yuan realized that she was his partner in creating dummy medicines. Deciding to take advantage of his pharmaceutical knowledge, she asked to check what exactly she had been taking in recent weeks. The man looked at the jar with interest and asked for a few minutes to find out the purpose of the drug. Entering another room, the girl noticed a large poster with the owner's name, Shen Chun, written on it. It was then that he completed his research and explained that the medication stimulates brain metabolism and nourishes the nervous system. Imagine her surprise when she learned that these drugs are used to treat amnesia. The man added that the product is not suitable for everyone, so there is no point in making a fake, and asked who exactly is taking it. Not wanting him to guess the truth, the girl lied that the medicine belonged to his friend. Approaching the wall, the man recalled that it was she who had given him the tapestry with their names on it, which he greatly valued. Seeing her own signature on the poster, Li Yuan assumed he was telling the truth. And finally, touching her body with a scalpel, he quietly asked her what his name was. She continued to behave the same way as before, hoping that would convince him. Putting the scalpel aside, the man asked her not to worry and to simply answer the questions. The girl understood that they were definitely not friends, and she was sure that even without amnesia, she would not have called him by his name. When the boy knelt down and began to beg, she only said that she was tired and wanted to sleep. However, she was clearly aware that this man was dangerous, and if she didn't say his name, she might not wake up. Remembering the inscription on the poster, she assumed that this was his real name. Seeing the familiar handwriting, she felt her memory slowly return, and then what his name was. Finally, she wished him good night, calling him Qin Li, and remembering that his surname was Shen. The man was sincerely happy to hear her say his name. After going to bed, Li Yuan couldn't hold back her tears, missing the cozy bed in Gu Xingye's house. She also remembered his care and attention in those moments when he covered her with a blanket. Suddenly, she heard strange sounds that seemed to be coming from the basement. Unable to sleep, the girl decided to quietly go downstairs and sneak a peek to see what was going on. In the basement, she saw Qian Li conducting gruesome experiments on the mummy. This startling scene appeared before her like a hammer blow to the temples, and her head began to split unbearably. At that moment, painful memories flashed through her mind that she had tried to forget for so long. She recalled how her father abandoned her when she was only 8 years old, and her mother soon became seriously ill, leaving them without any means. The little girl had to look for any way to get medicine, but no matter how much she begged, no one would lend her a helping hand. When she finally returned home, her mother lay unnaturally still, and it was impossible to wake her up. She could barely give her medicine, feeling that her mother's body was cold, but she still stubbornly believed that she was about to wake up. Soon, doctors came to the house and tried to gently explain to the girl that her mother was no longer alive. But she refused to believe it, looked at her face, which was already starting to turn pale, and repeated that everything was fine with her mother, and she would open her eyes soon. After that, the girl was sent to a shelter, where she was left completely alone. Later, the kind man adopted her, promised to bury her mother, and asked her to follow him from now on, because he had not come alone, but with his nephew. Then the memories changed again, and she saw a boy begging her not to fall asleep and forcing her eyes to open. Realizing that she might not survive, she asked him to run away as far as possible, and he replied that if they survived this time, she would definitely become his wife. Pictures from the past flashed back, and she remembered spending time with Gu Xingye as a child. Near one of the cherry trees, they buried time capsules, which they agreed to open many years later. Gu Xingye refused to say what exactly he put inside, so as not to spoil the surprise. Then they decided to return here exactly 15 years later and dig up their secrets together. In addition, the girl promised that they would remain as close and inseparable as in childhood, and that she would never betray him. She had no idea that in just a few years, their destinies would change forever. Over time, the girl ruthlessly destroyed anyone who stood in her way. This even applied to Gu Xingye, the person she had once sworn to protect forever. With these heavy memories, she finally opened her eyes. Standing in front of her was Qian Li, who coldly remarked that calling another man's name in his sleep while lying in his bed was, to say the least, impolite. He explained that she fainted when she saw his collection, adding that anyone else would have already become a part of it. Li Yuan, accustomed to his strange jokes, calmly asked if he knew of any islands dotted with pink cherries. He hadn't heard of such places, but offered to take her to the pier and ask her there. But the girl decided to go alone, saying that he had already saved her. Upon arriving at the pier, she learned that the house with the front yard belonged to Qian Li, and now she needed to go to the island. She decided to ask the first person she met if he knew of an island with pink cherries. After finding a man who agreed to take her there, Li Wen climbed aboard. Some time passed, and while sitting in her seat, she suddenly noticed a strange man in front of her. The girl realized that the ship was not heading to Hongbo Island, but the driver ordered her to be silent. Then he leaned closer and said that someone wanted to see her, so she had better not resist. At that very moment, 3 more people boarded the ship with clearly unkind intentions. Li Yuan was even annoyed that only 3 were sent against her. She was prepared for such a turn of events and had a weapon with her. Already thinking about how to quickly deal with the attackers, she suddenly felt the cold barrel of a gun near her temple, and it was held by none other than the ship's captain. But to everyone's surprise, they also put a gun to his temple, ordering him to immediately drop the gun and stop his men. This savior turned out to be none other than Gu Xingye, who gave them 1 minute to jump into the water and get out. Otherwise, they would die. The girl, who had only not seen him for 1 day, had already missed him and felt relieved to see him again. The captain reluctantly had to carry out the order, but he promised that sooner or later he would pay for this humiliation. Soon, he and his subordinates boarded a boat and sailed away from the ship. Li Yuan couldn't believe that Gu Xingye would let them go so easily, because it was completely unlike him. The man explained that the girl is now on everyone's radar, and everyone is tracking her whereabouts. At that moment, she realized how careless she had been. She briefly said that she was heading to a certain place, and learned that this was the only ship that went there. Taking the opportunity, she asked why he didn't do anything when she injured him, and took everything, but instead took her in and treated her. After all, in her opinion, it would be easier to intimidate her or take advantage of her weakness than to try to influence her feelings. At first, Gu Jingye didn't know what to say, but in the end, he quietly asked her if profit was really the most important thing in the world to her, and, as he expected, he saw an affirmative answer in her eyes. Then the guy asked what she would do if she were in his place. The girl, with a twinkle in her eye, replied that if someone took her things and hurt her, she would take revenge in the most cruel way. Smiling at her enthusiasm, the man finally asked how she would like to be avenged. Li Yuan openly said that she was willing to accept any punishment she deserved. Hearing this, the man was finally convinced that this was the same girl he had known all along. Finally, he offered to take her to the place she had been longing to go. But Gu Xingye didn't have time to finish, because the ship was shaken by a powerful explosion. These were the same assassins who, through eavesdropping, learned of her intention to reach the island with the time capsule. After the explosion, they were thrown far apart in the vast ocean. And surprisingly, the girl managed to survive again. She slowly reached the shore. Only then, looking back and not seeing Gu Xingye nearby, did she realize that he was no longer around. The girl cried in pain, because she was sure that he had died trying to save her. Li Yuan remembered how he cared for her, how he sincerely wanted to restore her memory, and she constantly doubted him. However, she realized that tears wouldn't help, and sitting around doing nothing wouldn't solve the problem, so she needed to find water and food. After a while, she began to make her way deeper into the island, feeling that there was something there. What a surprise it was for her to see a familiar house with pink cherry blossoms blooming near it. Meanwhile, the hired killers were sure that they had finally gotten rid of the girl and did not hide their joy. One of them did remember that he had to call and report to his boss about the completed task, but he didn't have time to do this because they were suddenly disarmed by Qian Li. He gave them a drug that would make them forget everything that had happened. Leaving the leader alive, the man coldly asked where the girl was now. He contemptuously called him a scoundrel who was unworthy of getting rid of Li Yuan. Meanwhile, Li Yuan cautiously entered the house, carefully examining it to see if anyone else was inside. The exterior showed that no one had lived here for a long time, but at the same time, everything seemed strangely familiar to her. She had a feeling that everything in this house was somehow connected to her. Suddenly, she saw a pile of cassettes with her own name on them. Turning on one of them, she saw herself as a little girl next to Gu Xingye. The boy was wearing a dress that she had once noticed in his wardrobe. With warmth in her heart, the girl recalled those events, and with them, her uncle. Suddenly, the boy on the recording reminded her of the time capsule, which is why she came to this island. She soon found the same tree under which the capsule was hidden and began to search for it carefully. Opening one of the capsules, she saw a photo of her family. In addition, she read a letter from Gu Tingye, which promised that he would definitely become taller than her. They would become friends, and if not, he would still kidnap her, and they would definitely be together. The memory of Gu Xingye reminded her again of his death and made her cry. To calm down, she decided to check what exactly she had hidden in her capsule. Imagine her surprise when she saw the square seal that so many people were hunting for. Suddenly, she heard a familiar voice and turning around, saw Qian Li in front of her, who was sincerely glad that she was alive. Not wanting anyone to find out about the square seal, the girl instantly hid it behind her back. Qian Li knew that she was interested in this place because there was a time capsule there, so he immediately asked what exactly she had found there. Instead of a direct answer, the girl answered the question with a question, while at the same time imperceptibly hiding the seal in her hair. When she questioned why he was following her, the guy just joked and said he was worried about her body. He suggested using the time capsule pits to bury Gu Qingye with honors. This proposal brought fear to the girl's eyes, as it once again confirmed her worst assumptions. Until she knew that the man had also seen the body, she still had a glimmer of hope that he had survived. But a moment later, Li Yuan herself saw his motionless body nearby. Eventually, the girl learned that the boy was alive and brought him to the house, trying to bring him back to consciousness. After a while, he opened his eyes, not expecting to see her, and assumed that she had saved his life. She didn't have time to say anything when he suddenly hugged her close, happy that she was worried about him. Besides, he was glad that now she no longer wished him dead, as she had before. Their idyll was suddenly interrupted by Qian Li, who ordered them to remove their hands from the girl. Otherwise, he threatened to use them as fish food. Knowing the nature of both, the girl tried to calm Gu Xingye down so that no new problem would arise. But when she realized that the men weren't going to stop, she simply started screaming. Qian Li deliberately tried to make her jealous by stating that he was the most important person in her life. But Gu Xingye did not succumb to the provocation, knowing that there was only a partnership between them. However, his confidence was shaken as soon as he learned that it was Qian Li who had saved him. Expecting such a reaction, Qian Li could not hide his pleasure. The girl could only listen to their arguments, sighing in her mind that they were behaving like children. Looking at Gu Xingye, she involuntarily remembered that his character had not changed at all since childhood. Meanwhile, Qian Li admitted that he wouldn't last long without medication, and even joked that he would bury him anyway. And on the pier, another man was thinking that Gu Xingye and Li Yuan could have hired help, but he was sure that they wouldn't be able to escape far. He ordered more weapons to be brought and not to allow them to return. The next morning, everyone was awakened by Qian Li's unbearable scream. It turned out that he had been awake all night, worrying about the wounded man, even though he hadn't asked her to. And even in such a situation, they could not resist a new quarrel. Li Yuan was already tired of reconciling them when she suddenly noticed a flame nearby. Looking closer, they realized that Qian Li's boat was on fire. In addition, they were surrounded by armed people, and the girl realized that without weapons, they were powerless. Gu Xingyi remembered that there was a secret tunnel under the house, so he suggested that they return immediately. But the criminals had already reached the house itself, hoping to find them there. Fortunately, they were already in a tunnel that resembled a cramped bunker. Ignoring Gu Xingye, the man advised the girl to leave him, saying he would become a burden. In response, Gu Xingye coldly remarked that if he wasn't afraid of death, then at least he shouldn't involve the girl in it. The three of them continued down the tunnel until one of the men accidentally touched a stone with his hand. Since the cave was old, a collapse occurred and they were covered in rocks. The girl guessed that it was a hidden mechanism that Gu Xingye had activated intentionally. When they were alone, the man decided to check if Qianli knew about her memory loss. The girl wanted to respond, explaining that she didn't want others to know about it. They continued talking until the girl noticed that they were being caught up. A moment later, an explosion occurred, destroying one of the tunnel walls. The criminals who opened the secret passage were sure that there was someone inside. When the dust cleared, Gu Xingye stood before them. He remained surprisingly calm because he knew the cave like the back of his hand and remembered all its secrets. By pressing on the hidden stone, he caused a new collapse, and giant boulders rained down on the enemies. Later, the girl returned to make sure that everything was okay with him. Li Yuan noticed that the attackers had become fewer and realized that they were also looking for Qianli. Her gaze dropped down, and she saw that the boy's wound was bleeding again. But in a second, they forgot about it because they noticed another silhouette. As expected, it was Qianli, who was relieved to see that the girl was alive. He couldn't help but remark on Gu Xingye's neglected appearance. He did not remain in debt and reprimanded Qianli for running away before the fight even started. Realizing that the path was clear, the girl suggested using the boat and getting out of here as quickly as possible. She also longed to know who so persistently wanted her dead. On the way back, Gu Jingye again suggested that she return home with him. But before she could answer, Qianli stood before her, not intending to let her go so easily. Gu Xingye calmly reminded her that despite everything, he was still her husband. And it was then that Gu Xingye suddenly proposed to her for real to marry him. Qianli warned that there might be an ulterior motive in this proposal and advised not to rush into responding. The girl didn't have time to say a word when the man added that she would receive many privileges if she agreed. Towards evening, they returned to the pier, where Gu Xingye's subordinates were already waiting for them. Returning home to treat the wound, the man once again asked her to think things over carefully. Meanwhile, Qianli suggested that she go to his place, but the girl refused, explaining that she still had urgent matters to attend to. She wanted to find out if her memory loss was related to that mysterious square seal. In the end, she still stayed the night at Gu Xingye's, realizing that it would be safer at his house. She desperately needed a safe place to hide the seal. Suddenly, the door to the room opened abruptly, and the boys burst in, hearing a suspicious noise as if someone had broken into the house. Huo Junji instantly grabbed his weapon, ready to neutralize the possible criminal. Imagine their surprise when they saw a girl who was just about to take a shower. Gu Xingye calmly ordered the embarrassed boy to leave immediately and not to interfere. Pushing the girl against the wall, Gu Xingye quietly asked what exactly she wanted from him. She was surprised by his ingenuity and said bluntly that she agreed to his proposal. Gu Xingye did not expect such a quick response and was even a little confused. Although fragments of the past flashed through her memory, she decided that she could trust her husband, but not herself. That's why she decided to keep the square seal away from him until she figured out why she was keeping it in the first place. Hugging the girl, the man also felt that she was hiding something, and he decided to get to the bottom of the truth. But she immediately warned that she had one important condition. Realizing that she needed a place where she could see many people and perhaps refresh her memory, she stated that she wanted a lavish wedding. Gu Xingye saw nothing strange in this and agreed, saying that she deserved the best ceremony. When Huo Junjie learned about his boss's upcoming wedding, he couldn't believe that he was going to marry this witch. He reminded him of the former president and his mysterious death. In addition, there were rumors that she was the one who had the square seal. But no one listened to him, and he had no choice but to silently begin preparations for the wedding. Meanwhile, Song Lu was watching a romantic movie, planning to use phrases from it to tease Junjie. As soon as she remembered him, the phone immediately rang. It was him. She was genuinely surprised that he was calling to ask for advice on how to prepare the wedding ceremony. But when she heard that his boss was getting married, her smile instantly turned to shock. Already devising her own plan, Sun Lu promised that he could count on her completely. After the conversation ended, she could not contain her anger because she was convinced that the man had taken advantage of the girl's amnesia to trick her into marrying him. A few days later, Li Yuan came to the store and started trying on new clothes. Noticing the suspicious look of the assistant who was helping her with the dresses, she sharply asked why he was following her. Sun Lu frankly replied that she had come to take her away to prevent the marriage, as there was a blood feud between them. At that moment, a man entered the store, deciding that the girl had already finished trying on clothes. Meanwhile, in one of the fitting rooms, the girls continued their tense conversation. Li Yuan hesitated about what to do, whether to take her to Guxingye or do something else. The man heard a strange noise from the fitting room and immediately headed there, drawing his weapon. But he didn't have time to do anything, because a girl came out of there who simply couldn't button her dress for a long time. Gu Xingyu wanted to help, but when he saw the outfit, he said it was too revealing and not worth buying. Sun Lu, who had been watching them all this time, could barely contain herself from jumping up and expressing everything she was thinking. Fortunately, Li Yuan managed to understand her intentions and instantly kissed the man, distracting him. Her subordinate was literally speechless from such a scene. Meanwhile, the girl gestured that it was time for her to disappear unnoticed. Complaining that he had wrinkled her dress, she forced him to mend the fabric, after which he promised to buy it so that she could wear it only for him. At this moment, one of the subordinates reported that Miss Dean was already here, causing a scandal and demanding a meeting. The man curtly ordered her to be taken away, having no desire to talk. However, Li Yuan became curious about what exactly she wanted to say, and she asked not to expel her. Dean Li sat in the lobby, nervously asking the guards if they had accurately relayed the information about her visit. In the end, the man still went out to her, knowing that she wouldn't go anywhere. Upon seeing him, she immediately began to be bombarded with questions about her upcoming wedding to Li Yuan. And then she reminded me that it was she who had once taken the life of his uncle. At this moment, Li Yuan finally understood what others meant when they said she had betrayed him. She couldn't believe that she could have personally killed the person who had once saved her and become family to her. Then she realized that Sun Lu was right when she said that there was a blood feud between her and her husband. At that moment, memories of her past life and how cruel she had behaved then flooded her mind again. She remembered the day she betrayed her boyfriend, breaking her promise to always stand by his defense. Gu Xingye tried to calm her down, begged her to believe him, and swore that he would definitely protect her. That woman, in a cold, indifferent voice, ordered him not to come any closer, stating that she didn't need anyone's help. He tried to warn her that if she left now, she would only confirm suspicions about her involvement in her uncle's death. But these words only angered her even more, and she blurted out that anyone who stood in her way must die. Immediately after this dream, the girl woke up, hugging her husband tightly. It was at this moment that Li Yuan finally realized his conflicting feelings for the one who had taken away his uncle, and at the same time, for the woman he had loved all his life. But despite this, she still had a suspicion that there was another, unknown motive behind his concern. When he asked her why she was looking at him like that, the girl replied that he had stopped giving her the same pills. Then Gu Jingye directly asked what she thought about that girl's words, which she must have heard before. Li Yuan, trying to speak carefully, said that she didn't believe a word of it because she was only trying to separate them. The man wasn't even surprised and calmly confirmed that it was a complete lie. However, the girl decided to trust only herself and was determined to find out the truth about her past. Later, Sun Lu talked about the presidents of chambers of commerce and their influence. Sun Lu explained that the man's uncle was also a former president, and the square seal of power disappeared when he died. She added that during the investigation, one of the witnesses stated that Li Yuan was involved in these events. She told all this to Li Yuan, who finally decided to trust the one who had told her the truth when they first met. The girl explained that many influential people had hired numerous searchers to find her and the missing seal. Realizing that the seal gave her a huge advantage, she even thought that she could make a deal and control the economic situation. Therefore, she asked to find any information about that witness and to find out in detail the circumstances of her uncle's death. She later became convinced that she was not involved in the murder, as she had previously entrusted the investigation to her assistant. Meanwhile, the man went to see Mr. Dean, whom he suspected of attempting to kill himself on the island. As expected, he categorically denied all the accusations. Moreover, he stated that Li Yuan was the murderer of the former president, and marrying her would mean an open conflict with the Chamber of Commerce. As soon as these words were spoken, the man felt the cold metal of the weapon on the back of his head. He was made clear that he had only one choice: either betray his family and become an enemy or support him. Meanwhile, the girl returned home late in the evening. Gu Xingye met her at the doorstep, immediately asking where she had been all day. She lied skillfully, saying that she couldn't choose a dress for the ceremony. But his words about her being banned from leaving the house again angered her even more. He explained this by saying he didn't want any surprises before their official wedding. Li Yuan was fed up with these restrictions, and she directly asked what really happened. The man admitted that he was simply afraid that she would refuse and not marry him. At this time, an unknown person quietly entered the house, apparently with the intention of getting rid of the girl. They both noticed him in advance and acted out a pretend scene in front of him, as if they didn't suspect anything. As soon as the danger passed, the girl immediately demanded an explanation of everything that was happening. Taking her hands, Gu Xingye assumed that she had remembered something again and asked about the square seal. The next day, she was going through her things and couldn't help but check to see if the seal was still in place. Suddenly, she felt that someone was about to attack again, and she reacted instantly. Xianli, who always showed up unexpectedly, was genuinely surprised by her lightning-fast reaction. He came to tell her what her future husband really does. Turning on the recorder, he let her listen to yesterday's conversation with Mr. Dean, and the girl heard the confident voice of a man who declared that he would never betray the Chamber of Commerce for the sake of some girl. Mr. Dean was satisfied with the answer, but still offered him to marry his daughter Lu Ying, convinced that the seal could be found without her. But before he could continue, the man put forward his own condition. Grabbing the weapon from his hands, he declared that he would agree to the marriage, but the leadership of the Chamber of Commerce must pass to him. Having convinced the interlocutor that he could rely on his son-in-law, he finally obtained his consent. After that, Qian Li reported that the man was currently registering his marriage with another girl in a restaurant that she had chosen herself and decorated the way she had always dreamed. Approaching her, he added that the girl had even taken the wedding dress she was trying on. The girl did not react to his words and silently left the room. Xian Li, expecting wild actions from her, assumed that she was going to kill this loving couple. But as soon as they wanted to leave, Huo Junji approached them and made it clear that he would not let them out of here. The girl turned off her emotions and realized that she was once again in a golden cage. Meanwhile, the newlyweds were already at the ceremony, and before the man could answer, a bullet hit the priest. And it was none other than Mr. Liao, who was not going to just give away his Chamber of Commerce. Meanwhile, the man calmly continued to say that the shot would attract the attention of many people, so they shouldn't rush. But the girl only smiled in response and noted that those who had noticed the shot did not seem to be his people at all. And this turned out to be true, because the man immediately heard the order to drop his weapon. Turning around, he saw his girlfriend, who introduced herself as Sun Zhou. While the man was trying to understand what was happening, Qian Li had already neutralized him with one blow. Unexpectedly for herself, the girl was truly worried about the boy for the first time. But Qian Li reassured her, saying that he had only fainted. At this moment, Li Yuan, looking at her reaction, was convinced that they were really dating. When there was nothing left on their path, the girl decided to visit one place. And of course, she was heading to the wedding ceremony to congratulate the newlyweds and arrange a real celebration for them. Sun Lu said she would stay here and take care of the boy's condition. But before she could even reach the church, it became known that someone had planted explosives, and many people were injured. Despite this, Li Yuan decided to go inside herself and check what was going on. And as expected, she saw her ex-fiancé with his new bride. Without paying any attention to Dean Li, she coldly asked why he always hides behind women and can't say anything himself. Gu Xingye silently pointed to his bruise and replied that he had nothing more to add. The new bride was also not thrilled with her appearance and asked her to leave the ceremony. Li Yuan even felt happy about this scene, because just a few hours ago, this man was her fiancé, so she advised her rival to never trust him because he always has hidden selfish motives. The bride was shocked by such audacity and even swung to hit her, but the girl easily caught her hand. The bride's father also did not stay away and sided with his daughter. The man asked Uncle Dean to let them go, reminding them that today was a special day. But Li Yuan was not going to leave things as they were, and promised to take revenge on those who deceived her. Meanwhile, Mr. Ding was informed that the person sent to find Mr. Liao had failed to catch up with him. The man didn't expect the head of the Chamber of Commerce to be so easy to catch, but he still thought he was a fool for being so quick to fall for Gu Qingye's words. But, looking at the man next to his daughter, he couldn't help but admit that over the years, he had made him change his mind and gradually began to oppose their agreements. He didn't even notice when the indecisive and thoughtful fool turned into a real wolf. Leaving the church, the man heard the voice of a girl who had been deliberately waiting for him. Li Yuan knew that he had been hunting her for the seal for a long time, so she wanted to offer a deal. She directly stated that she wanted to destroy Gu Xingye and prevent him from standing in her way. And in exchange, she was ready to give up the seal. The man was surprised by this proposal, but still wondered what role he would play in her plan. Her words even made him laugh, because once he had really wanted to get the seal, but now he was almost the head of the chamber, so it's more important for him to get rid of those who get in the way, and above all, her.